Okay, let's keep factoring with DSMA 9 part 2. Again, I'm going to do both the box method and the AC method. Okay, so we have 4y squared plus 29y plus 7. Okay, so we're going to take the 4 times the 7. Come over here. 4 times 7 gives me 28. All right, so 28 is what I'm going to work on as far as factors. So for factors, I have 1 times 28. I have 2 times 14. 3 does not go in there. I have 4 times 7, and I think that's it. All right, so remember, based on what we were doing, we need the factors to, when we multiply them together to get the positive 28, when we add them together, we want to get the 29 that's in the middle here, the positive 29. So for us, we're going to take 1 and 28. Looks a little odd, but that's what we're going to do. So let's come over here and make our box. I'll give myself lots of room here. All right, in the first box, I'm going to put the first term from up above in the problem, so that's 4y squared. In the last box, I'm going to put the last term from the problem up there, so that's 7. Okay, now I need to put the 1 and the 28 that I found, but they have to have a variable. So I'm going to have 1y and 28y. This was all my work over here. And again, it doesn't matter where you put it. I'm going to go ahead and put that 1 there even though. Looks a little funny. Okay, so now if I added my boxes up, I would get to the original problem because I have 4y squared. If I added what I have on catty corner, I would have 1y plus 28y. That would get me back to the 29y up here, and then 7 at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and do our greatest common factors. So first we're going to do each row. So the first row we have 4y squared, and we have 28y. So no signs to worry about. Let's see, 4 goes into both of those. So we're going to put a 4 out of there. And then we have an extra y. Okay, down below, this is why I wanted to show you this problem. So we have 1y and we have 7. Well, the 1 and the 7 only have a 1 in common, but I have to pull that 1 because I need this space holder. There's no y in common. And of course, it's going to be positive because everything's positive, but because the first term is positive. So this looks a little strange. Okay, now let's do each column. So we're going to do the greatest common factor for each column. We have 4y squared and 1y. Well, the 4 and the 1 just gets us 1, but we do have an extra y here. And then we have 28 and 7. So 28 and 7 have a 7 in common. We're going to put a plus with both of these. There's not an extra y. Okay, so we are done. We can pull these in either order. So I'm going to put 4y plus 1 and then y plus 7. And again, you could foil this to check your work. Let's go ahead and do that with this one. Let's come over here to the side and we're going to foil. All right, so we have 4y times y gives me 4y squared. 4y times 7 is 28y. 1 times y is plus y, and then plus 7 on the end. And so if I add that together, I would get the 4y squared plus 29y plus 7. So I am good to go. And we will put this in here. All right, let's do the AC method on the next page. So this was the box. Okay, so we have 4y squared plus 29y plus 7. Let's do the AC method over here. All right, we still start the same way no matter what. It's just how it looks at the end. So we have 4y squared and we have 7. There's no greatest common factor. So we're going to go ahead and multiply 4 times 7, which gets us the 28, and then find the factors of 28. So we have 1 times 28, 2 times 14, and 4 times 7. So now now that we have those factors, we need to know which one of those factors would sum to give me the 29y in the middle. So that would be 1y and 28y. So let's come over here. We're going to rewrite our problem, but instead of writing the 29y in the middle, we're going to write plus y plus 28y. Again, order doesn't matter. We could do it the other way. And now we're going to go ahead and factor by grouping. So if we look at these first two, we have 4y squared plus y. That's only a y in common. And then we look at the second two, the only thing in common is a 7. And so that also leaves me with 4y plus 1. So now I can pull the 4y plus 1 to the front, and I'm left with y plus 7. Hopefully you've seen enough of these factoring by grouping by now that I didn't have to draw the arrows. Again, we can write that the other way around. That is correct as well. We could write it as y plus 7 times 4y plus 1. Either way is correct. All right, let's do another one with signs. Here we have 2x squared minus 9x minus 4. So first we check for the greatest common factor, but there's nothing in common across 2, 9, and 5, so there's nothing we can do. So now we have to multiply the 2 times the negative 5. That gives us negative 10. Let's find factors of negative 10. Now remember, because the middle term is negative, my largest number needs to be negative. So I would have 1 times negative 10, 2 times negative 5. I think that's it. Okay, so the other two terms, we have two more factors, but they wouldn't work because we have negative 1 times 10. If we add those together, we get a positive 9. And we have negative 2 times 5, but same thing. If we add those together, we get a positive 3. So that's not going to work. Looks like this one's going to work because I would get a 1x and a negative 10x. So if I add those two together, I would get the negative 9x that I need in the middle. So let's do our box over here. That's out of order box. All right, so I have 2x squared, first term here, last term here, and then I'm going to put in the 1x and the negative 10x. Does not matter which way I do it. And again, if I added all these boxes back up, this also looks like the AC method, right? These are all the same terms. So if I added these all up and I added these catacorner, I would get up to the negative 9x, right? 1x minus 10x. All right, so let's get to work with our greatest common factors. So we're going to do each row first. So I have 2x squared and negative 10x. So if I look at the two numbers, looks like I would put a 2 in common and an x. Then if I look at the second row there, I have 1x and negative 5. Nothing in common, so I'm going to put a plus 1. Remember, you have to have a placeholder, though. You can't just say nothing because that's not going to work. When you go to check your work and multiply, you're not going to get back to the original answer. All right, then let's do each of the columns. So for that first column, we have 2x squared and 1x. Well, the 2 and 1 has nothing in common except a 1, but I can pull an x out of there. Now, in the second column, I have to be careful. The first term is negative, and so I need a negative here. So it looks like 10 and 5, I could pull a 5 out, and that's it. All right, so then I have 2x plus 1 times x minus 5. And that is going to be our answer. I'm going to go ahead and check that work on the next page. We can FOIL. You always want to FOIL and check your work because especially when you have signs, it would be really easy to switch your signs. All right, let's do the same work with 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. So we're going to start with 2x squared. Instead of negative 9x, we're going to put plus 1x minus 10x minus 5. All right, just like we would do in the box, except we're just doing it in a line. Now we're going to do our factoring by grouping. So the first two terms, I have a 2 and a 1, so I can only pull a 1, but it looks like I can pull an x out of there. Now, my first term is negative, the negative 10, so I have to pull a negative, and then I have 10 and 5, so I want 5. So now be careful when you're dividing, because you're dividing a negative by a negative. So negative 10x divided by negative 5 gives me a 2x. And then negative 5 divided by negative 5 gives me a plus 1. All right, so now I can pull the 2x plus 1 to the front. That leaves me with x minus 5. Again, it can be the other way around. We could have x minus 5 times 2x plus 1. All right, let's check our work. So we're going to FOIL. 2x times x gives me 2x squared. 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times negative 5 gives me negative 5. So now I can combine my like terms in the middle. And I am back to the original problem. Yay. All right, we have a little more going on here. We have two variables, so we're going to have to be really careful when we make our box. Let's check for greatest common factor, but it's not going to work. I have a 3, a 10, and a 32. The last two have a 2 in common, but it's not going to work because I have a 3 in front. So we're stuck with all of these. So we're going to go ahead and take the 3 in front times the negative 32. So that gives me 3 times negative 32. That's going to give me a negative 96. So now I'm going to have to start with my factors. Now I know my middle term is negative, therefore I know my bigger number is negative. So that helps me. That gets me started. Let's see, 2 goes in there. That would be negative 48. 3 goes in there. 4 goes in there. 5 does not. 6. There we go, I think. Negative 16. Right, 6 goes in there once. Yep. Okay, so I can stop, even though I could go a little bit further. I can stop on this one because I can see that if I multiply 6 times negative 16, I get the negative 96. And if I add them together, I would get the negative 10 that I need up here. Now I'm going to have to be really careful because my middle variables are a and b. So I have to grab 6ab and negative 16ab. Otherwise, if I add those two together, I am not going to get negative 10ab in the middle. All right, so let's set up our box here. All right, in the first box, I have 3a squared. In the last box, I have negative 32b squared. Right, I have to grab everything. So 3a squared, negative 32b squared. All right, now I'm going to put the 6ab in here and the negative 16ab in here. Again, I could have switched those. Does not matter. All right, let's get to work with our greatest common factor. So this is the box method. All right, if I look at the first row, 3 and 16 don't have anything in common, but I can pull an extra a out of both of those. On the second row, looks like I can pull a 2 because 6 and 32 are both even, and a b. All right, so that looks a little different from what we've been doing. We can't pull an a because only the 6ab has the a, but I can pull a b out of both of those. And you'll see why we'll need that in just a minute when we have to FOIL and check our work. Okay, now let's do the columns. So the first column, I have 3 and 6, so I can pull a 3. I have a squared and a, so I can pull an a. I can't pull a b because only the bottom one has a b. All right, and then finally, my last column, I have to pull a negative because the first term's negative. 16 goes into both of those, and it looks like I can pull a b. Whew. All right, so I'm going to put all that up here so that I can check my work. A plus 2b times 3a minus 16b. Okay, so that's my answer. I hope. We're going to double check our work here. Let's go ahead and FOIL and check. Okay, so let's put this in its own little box. All right, so a times 3a would give me 3a squared. A times negative 16b would give me negative 16ab. 2b times 3a would give me plus 6ab. And then finally, 2 times negative 16 would give me negative 32, and b times b would give me b squared. Whew. All right, so those middle two terms are alike. They both have an a and a b. So if I add negative 16 plus 6, I would get negative 10ab minus 32b squared. And sure enough, that gets me back to the original problem. Oh my goodness. All right, let's just go ahead and do the AC method on the next page for those of you who would rather do AC and not box. All right, so this is the exact same problem as the one on the page before. I went ahead and brought our analysis over where we looked at our factors and grabbed 6ab and negative 16ab. Okay, so I'm going to put these in different order when I do this. So we're going to rewrite the problem. We've got 3a squared first, and then instead of writing the negative 10ab, I'm going to write these two terms down here. So I'm going to go ahead and put the negative here. Then I don't have to worry about a negative first term. Okay, so I wrote the first term of 3a squared. Instead of negative 10ab, I wrote the two terms that I found when I factored. But I had to have the a and the b there. And then my last term. So now I'm going to do factoring by grouping. With the first two terms, 3 and 16 don't have anything in common, but I can pull an a out of there. On this side, I have a positive number, and I have 6 and 32, so I think I can pull a 2 and a b. So that leaves me with 3a minus 16b. And then now what I have in common is the 3a minus 16b, and then I grab the a plus 2b. So the method is really up to you. There's other methods too. There's guess and check. That's what I had to learn when I was growing up because we didn't have all these fancy methods. So that's fine too, although that gets a little difficult as these numbers get bigger. It's a little harder to do the guess and check, but we have asterisk method, AC method. Asterisk method, if you just Google it, you'll see it's really like the box. It's just a different way to organize it. Okay, let's try another one. So this problem is a prime example of why you should check for your greatest common factor first, because I really do not want to break down 500. I would have to take 5 in the front times 100 in the back, and that would become quite a mess. So if I look across these three terms, look how there's a 5 in common. As soon as I do that, I have a much easier problem on my hands, right? As soon as I pull that 5 out, now I have a problem like we did in DSMA 7. And you've got x squared minus x minus 20. And so I could use that old method if you want, or you really could still use the box. So with the box, this one would be, we would have a 1 in the front. So we would come over here and we would multiply 1 times negative 20, which gives us negative 20. And we want the factors of negative 20, but our middle term is negative. So our middle term is not always negative. All these problems, the middle term's negative. All right, so I need two terms that are going to sum to negative 1, but when I multiply them, I get negative 20. So that's going to be 4 and negative 5. So I have 4x and I have negative 5x. So I can do either method at this point. Now here's the important part though. That 5 has to stay out front. So if I come down here and quickly do the box, so if you always just want to use a box, that works. I have x squared, I have minus 20, I have 4x and negative 5. All right, let's see what we have here. Oops, I forgot my x. That would have been a problem. All right, so I have an x in column common here. I have a 4 here. I have an x here, and I have a minus 5 here. Remember, if the first term's negative, you have to pull a negative. So inside here, I now am going to factor this like this, but that 5 has to stay out front. We can't just drop it. So the inside is x plus 4 times x minus 5, but I have to have that 5 that I pulled out in front. And I am good to go. You could, and so if you want, the AC method would of course work the same way. So I'm gonna go ahead, this video is getting long. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next problem. All right, so this is one of the easier trinomials to factor, except that there's a negative in the front. It's more difficult to factor with a negative in the front. And so what we like to do is just pull that negative 1 out. So we're going to pull a negative 1 out to the front. That means everything inside is going to change signs. Okay, so each of those terms were divided by negative 1. So negative x squared divided by negative 1 gives me positive x squared. Negative 9x divided by negative 1 gives me 9x. And then 10 divided by negative 1 gives me negative 10. All right, so now I can factor. I can either factor like we did in DSMA 7 and find factors of negative 10 that sum to 9, or I could use the box method and grab the 1 that's sitting here and the 10 here. Either way you want to look at it. Or we could use AC method. So maybe we'll use AC method on this one. Okay, so this time our middle term is positive, and therefore our larger number needs to be positive. So we'd have negative 1 times 10. Looks like that one's going to work. Negative 2 times 5. All right, so it looks like these two would work. If I took a negative 1x and a positive 10x, if I add those two together, I would get the 9x in the middle. So let's go ahead and leave them. We're going to leave the negative out front, and let's do the AC method. So we would have x squared minus x plus 10x minus 10. Again, this negative has to stay out front. So let's see. We're going to factor by grouping. So I've got x times x minus 1. Over here, I have a 10 in common to both. So I'm going to pull that 10 out. And finally here, now I have an x minus 1 in common. And then I have an x plus 10 left. And of course, it would be very smart to check your work, right? This is actually the answer, but it would be very smart to FOIL those two and then bring the negative 1 back in to check your work. Because again, it is really easy to mix up your signs and maybe put the negative with the 10 and the positive with the 1. But the big thing out of this problem is that if you see that your first term is negative, then you want to pull a negative out of the entire problem.